My name is Jack Hoven. I work for Citrix as a technical relationship manager, which means I need to talk to sysadmins about the technology, and also be able to talk to management and translate a little bit of the technology in a way that they understand it as well. I'm very audible in the back. Just checking. Yeah. No, it's okay. The session is going to be around AppLayering, and especially around what do you do after you import ELM and how to set it up quickly. It's not going to be around the OS layers, how to create them, or application layers, how to create them. There are a lot of sessions and documentation around that already on the internet. But this session is mainly on what do you do first after you import ELM. Just a quick show of hands. Who has already done some work on AppLayering? Installed it, configured it? Okay. And hopefully some things are already known to you. Quick overview on the agenda. A little bit more about myself. Then we'll do a quick high-over introduction on AppLayering. Some of the prerequisites, what is needed. And then we'll get down to what needs to be, or what needs to get done before you can start creating your app layers. Some best practices, some performance tips as well. As I'm a support guy, also some troubleshooting tips, and also some latest information on the 4.11 release that's released on May 30th, I believe. Well, who am I? What I said, Jack Hoven, lead technical relationship manager at Citrix. Been working for Citrix now over 6 years in this same role. Been working in IT just a little shy of 20 years. Started as a sysadmin, first line support, and then moved on towards technical consulting, and now as a CRM for Citrix. Personal information a little bit. I'm a dad of twins, so they're having their birthday tomorrow, so that's fun. Also, a little spare time that I have, I like to be behind of a photo camera, same one as Ronan is using now. And that's a little bit about me. Introduction, high over on AppLayering. AppLayering, well, Citrix acquired it in 2017, formerly known as Unidesk. And in a nutshell, it is the software that you can separate your applications from your OS layer, use the data from your OS layer, and make it more versatile to create separate layers and separate OS images without having to reinstall all your applications every time. A little bit around the licensing. Application layering is available in most of the editions, except of the ZApp Secure Browser. What do you get with the AppLayering version? You get a connection to a single hypervisor, so that's either a VMware vCenter, Server Pool, you name it. You also have a single provisioning mechanism, so either PVS, MCS, and if you want to do more or multiple connections to either your hypervisor or multiple provisionings mechanisms, then you would need to have the Platinum version. If you're on the cloud, I'm not sure who here in the room is already on the cloud. Nobody? True. Then this would be all the Platinum features would be in the cloud release as well. I hope this slide comes a little bit familiar to everyone, because this is one of the slides that's been used in all the presentations. There are two methods of deployment.
Microphone or something?
Needs to be louder?
Yeah.
One sec, let's see if this works. Yellow? Okay. Then we'll do it like this. Two layering deployment methods. One is in regard to through the ELM, and you connect to your provisioning mechanism. There you can provide at least your OS layers and your application layers. And on the other hand, you also have the elastic layering that goes through a standard network share. So it's a SMB share. And you provide your applications or your user layers through there. Some prerequisites. Not going to throw the entire edocs at you, but I do have some information. The ELM is based on CentOS, so it's a Linux virtual machine. It's an open format virtual machine, so you can import it to any hypervisor you want. Xen server, VMware, Hyper-V, Azure, you name it. Default, it's configured with 8 gigs of RAM, 4 virtual CPUs, and it has 330 gigs of storage configured. 30 gigs is for the ELM itself, and 300 gigs is for your layers. We still do have the Silverlight web console, and for those of you really urging for the HTML5 version, it's still not there. I've checked with product management and it's still not coming. It is somewhere on the roadmap, but not likely to be there soon. You can either use DSP or a static IP address, and if you want to, you can either configure your ELM through the hypervisor console or an SSH connection. The storage, the 330 gigs for your layers, is expandable. So if you want to, you can increase the storage. The hypervisor you can use, well, of course, Xen server, 6.5 until 7, the latest 7 releases. Azure Resource Manager, of course. Hyper-V, 2012 R2 and 2016 currently. Nutanix Acropolis is also supported with the 5.0 and 5.5 release. And for vSphere, we currently support 5.5, 6.0 and 6.5. As I said, network file share is needed, so it's a default SMB share. The network connection between the ELM and file share needs to be 10 gig, or needs. If you want some good support and good performance, then you need to at least have the 10 gig connection. Directory services currently are AD, Microsoft AD is supported. And the management console, as I said, Silverlight 4.0. And the browsers supported are Internet Explorer and Firefox. If we look at the operating system for your layered image, on the server side, we support 2008 R2, 2012 R2, and 2016 currently. On the desktop side, Windows 10, almost all the versions. 1803 is coming, it's not yet supported. And Windows 7. Who of the people running AppLayering is using Windows 7? No? Windows 10? Yeah. 7?
We're using Server 2016.
Server 2016, okay. Platforms, the connectors that you can use, MCS for Xen server, Nutanix, VMware. Setup and Xen desktop essentials for Azure, and PVS. Also, the main versions are supported. Xen desktop, Xen app OnPremise is supported as well, along with Azure, and of course VMware or SMV. So that's still supported and still going on. If you want to speed up everything and you want to start and prepare before you import your ELM, you have to have at least a couple of things with you or arranged. Those are your hypervisor credentials to make your connector, service accounts, in regards to the Active Directory and also for your file shares. Storage. If you're running out of storage, you can't import your ELM, so you have to make sure that your hypervisor has enough storage, and you have your file shares already created. If you've done that before you start with your ELM import, then at least you can go in one go and configure everything. This is not working very good, but okay. Going into the other things, there are two main ways to connect. One is, of course, on-premise, and the other one is through the cloud. If we look at the order on-premise, you download the ELM software, the package from the Citrix website. You extract the appliance, you import it to your hypervisor. At that point, while it's importing, not sure why, but the import takes a long time. At least in my lab, it was over an hour. So during that time, you can either do nothing, get some coffee or beers or whatever, or you can work on some prep as well, because you do need a template VM, a diskless VM, of which you can use in the next time for your VMs to boot up. So you can create that one, create a template VM with at least the same amount of CPUs and memory that you would give your production VMs. Also, at that point, you can start with creating your OS template. If you want to create an OS template, you start with your OS template VM by installing it and install the OS machine tools. I'll come a little bit further. I'll discuss a little bit more on the template VM for your OS. At that point, your ELM should be imported, so you can connect to your ELM and log on via the console or SSH. Because you still need to configure it for the IP address, time servers, DNS, and everything. Once you've done that, you can actually connect to your via Firefox or Internet Explorer to your console. Before doing a demo on that, in the cloud, it's slightly different. Main steps are the same, but in the cloud, you go to cloud.citrix.com, you log on with your credentials, cloud account, you select your hypervisor of choice, so again, Send Server, Azure, Hyper-V, Nutanix, or VMware. If you haven't done already, you install a cloud connector on one of your on-premise machines, or in the cloud. You download your appliance, you import it, and at that point, again, you create your template VM. Here as well, you need your template VM, your diskless template VM, and also your OS template. So once you've done that and the import is complete, you also configure the VM. So IP address, time zone, DNS, stuff like that. Hopefully the cloud is working with me, so let's have a look on the cloud. Sorry. And something was wrong. Yeah. You just make a connection, you log on with your credentials. That's fun. Come on, you can do it. Yes. Usually you don't see this, but because we have also two environments, I need to select one. Come on, Wi-Fi. Pray for the demo gods. Come on, guys. Come on. There it goes. Come on. Somebody downloading something on the Wi-Fi?
It's the Citrix US experience in Europe.
I must say I had a little bit quicker, but okay. You select the service, so you select AppLayering, you hit manage. At that point it will connect to the AppLayering service. Come on. Yes. This is the part what I said earlier, where you select your hypervisor, you create and download your cloud connector and the appliance. There are instructions in there as well. Once you've done that, you can go to manage, and from here you enter either this is a connection to your local environment or your cloud environment. So you give up the name or the IP address. In this case, I'm using the IP address on my lab. 3. And it's now starting a session in the cloud, hosting a Internet Explorer with Silverlight support. So it's now launching a XenApp session in the background with the Internet Explorer. So that's logging me on. Okay. Now we need to wait for Internet Explorer to load. Come on. There we go. Tested it a little bit earlier during one of the sessions and it was a slight bit faster, but
Dus voor deze bent, Jack.
yeah. Yeah, I'm on. There you go. Management console is loading. Okay, here you provide your username and your password. Default password, by the way, for the appliance, once you download it, it's Unidesk1. Now authenticate. This is a appliance that I imported on my Zen server in my lab, so it is remote, so it's not cloud hosted. From here, you can go to the system for your start, and then you need to go to system and configuration once it's done loading. And first things first, just create your file share or configure your file share. In this case, provide the name or the IP address, your username, configure it with the service account, provide your password, and you test your file share to see if the connection is okay. And once that's succeeded, then you can save it. And from there on, all your user layers and your layers what you want to publish will be saved on this share. Next, what you can do is either create your connectors or your directory service. If you go to directory services, you have the option here, if it wants to work with me. So you can create a directory junction, which knows which AD you have, and also create your groups and your roles if you want. Come on. I've already created one just before. Usually you have an extra button here that says create directory junction. You select that usually. I'll do now the edit function. You name your directory junction. You can give it any name you like. The IP address or FQDN of your domain controller. The ports that you want to use, plain text or SSL. And you test your connection, just to make sure everything is reachable. Once that is done, you can hit the down arrow. give your credentials, either a service account or an admin, and again provide the credentials. You test the authentication as well to see if everything is okay. Well, authentication succeeded. Hit the down arrow, and here you select your base DN, and you can test this if all is working correctly. If you have any problems with your AD, either your users can't log on to the console or do anything, make sure this is still reachable, so you can edit and check it if everything is still okay. The attribute mappings, you can leave those at default. And for the last, you create, or in this case, update the directory Junction.
Jack,
Yeah.
why do you not see create new directory junction?
I haven't got a clue. Maybe if I switch back and forth, but for some reason, there it is.
So,
Lag in the console. Well, let's go to the directory. If you want to add some roles, for example, you want to give users read-only access, or you want to have help desk users, you can configure this. You just select your users. That's retrieving the data. Come on. Let's say my DHCP users. Edit properties. Come on. It's not the quickest connection. Here you can provide the roles and the services that you want to give your users. So if you want to give them read-only access or admin access, or if you want to give them additional roles, you can provide that here. And you update the group. And once it has done that, you can see here on the roles tab, you can see indeed the DHCP users that are configured. And at that point, if you select the information button, then you should see the information that you just configured. You also see some more LDAP information on this group as well. Next up, if you go back to system and then connectors, you can create here your connectors. You can add your hypervisor connector and your provisioning connectors. You hit the add connector config, and you get the menu for the various options for the provisioning methods and also for your hypervisor connections. And let's hope this works now. So in this case, I'm trying to configure a Zen server connection. Should start. Okay. During the test run, this took quite a while, so I'm just trying it for a minute. Otherwise, I'll go to the slides. Otherwise, we'll be waiting 6 minutes, and we don't want to do that. Yeah, well. Any questions at this point?
what's it doing while it's doing that? Because it always takes ages.
Yeah, for the fun part, when I use the cloud connector, it takes quite a while. And if I do it on premise, then it's usually 4 or 5, maybe 10 seconds. And at that point, it tries to connect and load some information on the background, but I'm not sure why it takes ages on the cloud. Could be in my case that I'm doing it in a lab at home, but some DNS issues maybe. It takes too long. Let's just go back to the slides then. The AD connection we had. Okay, the connectors. What I said, add connector config. You have the option to select your sensor or your hypervisor. You should be able to see this after a few minutes, in my case. And at that point, you select or you enter your hypervisor. So it can either be your pool or dedicated server. You provide your password. Take the mic. You provide your credentials again. You hit check credentials. If you don't check the credentials, then you are not able to continue. So you have to check the credentials. And at that point, you can select the application or the template VM, the diskless template VM, that you converted to a template as well in your hypervisor. At that point, select the storage that you want. And afterwards, this is set as optional for your cache. But I would say create a cache. Size is dependent on the amount of OS layers that you're going to create, because the cache is going to be used for when you create your layers, that it caches it on the hypervisor. You can choose optionally. If you don't set it, every time that you create a layer, your template, your OS template, will be copied down to your hypervisor. And if you're running VMware, it will convert it first to a VMDK file, and that can take a while. I've heard that it could take up to 40 minutes to create and convert just the OS layer before you can even start creating your application layer. So if you want to use the cache, please do, because that does speed up that portion of the process. If you use the cache and you create an app layer, at that point, if it's cached already, it can take just seconds before you can start.
So does your cache have to be the same size or bigger than as your OS layer?
Yes. If you have the cache smaller than your OS layer size, then it doesn't cache that well. So I would say if you know you're going to create 3 or 4 different OS layers, make sure that the cache size is slightly bigger than those 4 OS layers. You can change this setting always. So you can edit your connector and you can expand it, the cache size if you want to. So it's not, if you set it now, it's set in stone and you can't change it, but you can do that afterwards as well. Then you test it and you save your connector. And at that point, you can configure your provisioning connector as well. So you again hit add connector config and you select your connector. In this case, I'll first do an MCS. So you have to connect again to your hypervisor, provide the information for the hypervisor, the information, the credentials, check credentials again, and then select again your diskless template VM. The storage where you want to put your VMs at that point, so that can be a different storage location than you selected first, but that's up to you. You test it and you save this configuration again. Afterwards, if you want to do a PVS connection, you can select your PVS server. Make sure the agent is installed on your PVS server as well, if you want to do this. Otherwise, your PVS server won't show up in this list. So if you don't have your PVS server listed here, make sure you have the agent configured or installed on your PVS machine as well, and it's running. Provide the credentials, check credentials at that point, and you're able to connect to your PVS server. Select the site that you want, the store, and where you want to push your put your cache. You can select either cache on server, cache and RAM with overflow to hard disk, whatever you want. Also, license mode KMS, non-local. provide any other information that you want. Active Directory machine account password is default enabled. Hit test, and then save it again. And then at that point you have your default configuration up and running. At this point you can start with your application layer, your OS layer creation. Any questions around this?
The
Yeah.
license one.
Yeah.
You've got an option for KMS.
Yeah.
You set your KMS licensing in the machine tools in your OS layer. So when do you put KMS here?
I believe if you use PVS, then you put normally you configure the KMS on the PVS side, and you leave it at none. You can either choose when you configure it on the PVS side, so in this option, or when you configure it on the OS. If you're using PVS, I would say leave it at the PVS side.
But for the enable Active Directory machine account password, it's the same.
Yeah, because this is directly talking to PVS as well. So this is actually the settings that you normally set on the PVS server as well. So these are the settings. So the site, the store name, the cache, the license mode, and everything. Those are the settings that you usually set on the PVS in the PVS console. But now you're doing it on this part.
It creates the PVS image,
Yeah, sure.
file, and then it imports it into PVS.
Into PVS and
The store
configures
set
this already.
settings you put there.
So you configure this here, and then once it imports into PVS,
Yeah.
these settings are taken along.
What takes precedence then? So if I go and update my connection, then will it take this settings or?
If you edit the connection again on the ELM or in PVS. If you edit it on PVS, then at that point the machines will have the PVS settings, I believe. I'm not sure about that one. Need to check.
They will not be changed here, no.
No.
No, this is really for all the machines you configure in the future. So if you change it here, then the next machine you publish, the disk you publish, will use those settings. Also, if you make a change here with the right to cache, you want to make a different setting later on, you can do it within PVS and just change the option for the vdisk there. These are just the settings with which the disk is being published to your PVS server. Well,
Thanks.
Jack?
Yeah.
When do we get PowerShell support for AppLayering?
Very good question, and no clue. Sorry. At the moment, there is no PowerShell for that available. So.
it's a Linux appliance, eh? So.
Yeah. Okay. Best practices, performance, OS layering. Well, if you create an OS layer, I hope everyone has seen these slides already from other presentations, but just install a clean OS. Don't reuse an existing VM that you already have configured with an AD account and then remove it from Active Directory and reuse it at that point. Just create a brand new VM if you have to use an ISO, but only create or install the OS, install your VMware tools or hypervisor tools, and don't join it to the domain at that point. Patch it, install .NET or any other redistributables, Jesus. And copy the OS image tools. Not sure why they call it OS image tools and not just an agent, but install the image tools and don't optimize it here. I know in the past everyone said optimize it here and then import the VM, but don't optimize it here. If you run into any issues with your optimizations and you need to revert back, you need to create a new OS layer, start from scratch, build your OS, install the hypervisor tools, patches, stuff like that. If you put this in a separate layer, you can, if you run into any problems, you can deselect that layer and check if there are any issues with that layer.
Why
Yeah.
are you putting your hypervisor tools in the OS layer and not the platform layer?
Why do you put them in the in the OS layer or not in the different platform
In
layer?
the platform layer.
Because at least that's from my point of view. If you put them in the OS layer, then at that point some tools need to have an additional reboot and drivers installed. And this is something that I would do. Just put them in the OS layer, then you have all the correct information, the network connection, and I think that is the main one for the network drivers to be able to communicate correctly.
But Jake, how about cloud portability? That platform layer was meant and initially sold from marketing perspective to be that solving point for having a generic OS layer that can fit into any other cloud with their respective tools.
Yeah.
And now I have the other tools in the OS layer, which I understand why they are there right now. How does it fit in a traditional work? Nobody in the audience, I would say, would put a base image with, for example, with VMware tools and convert it just into Azure and say we add the Marks tools plus on top of that, and not uninstalling the other stuff from wherever, for example. How does it fit from the story and technology perspective?
If you create an OS layer for the cloud, I would say leave those tools. Yeah, Martijn?
Can I add on that one? Because
Yeah.
I actually know this. The thing is that the OS layer, also if you, for example, do Sense Server, the tools get already installed as part of the deployment or US deployment.
Yeah.
Sense Server does it automatically. In the platform layer, you can add additional plugins for the Cloud Connector, for example. So in that case, if you what you do when you make your OS layer, even have the Sense Server tools, you can have your platform layer add there your Azure connectors, whatever Cloud Connector you want to use there. You have your applications, then you finalize a disk, that will come there later, I think. And then you can just provision that disk to the cloud because it includes the connector. So in that case, it can have a connector both for Sense Server tools and for the cloud connector.
Okay.
So this is how we make the integration for the cloud seamlessly.
Okay. And at this point, important. Some application best practices. If you create your OS layer, just leave on the desktop a shortcut to your installation sources. Otherwise, if you need to download them once you have your application layer open, you will consume a lot of more disk space, because if you have already downloaded your software and put it on a file share you have access to, it will, if you go to a website, download your installation files, it will copy to a temporary file, copy to the location that you want to, or you provide it, then unzip it, then install it. All those separate downloads and files will increase the size of your layer at that point. Even though if you delete everything and remove all the temporary files and folders, the size of the disk will already be expanded. So it will not shrink again back to the original size of the application installation. So if you copy any additional information locally and you delete it, the size of your disk will be the size it maximum had. So that's something, if you want to keep your disks as small as possible, just make sure you have a central repository where you keep your installation files.
Is there a way to shrink the disk back to what's actually used and not what the maximum was?
Not at the moment. On your packaging machine, where you create your layers, make sure it has enough RAM, so make it 4 gigs of RAM or even more. So don't downsize on that one, just continue, and I would say make it the same specs as your production machines would have. So that makes it easier also for your performance. Hypervisor tools should be updated on the OS layer so that there are no interaction issues. And if you have any applications that do auto-update, disable that function. Because there's no real use for the update functionality in a read-only image. It only causes more problems than it will solve. If you need any dependencies, install them, but don't install just because you might need them in the future. So if you need some dependencies, install them as a prerequisite for some application, but don't overdo it. The user settings are not saved in the layers. So if you need to make any additional settings for the users, just make sure that they are not captured in the application layer at that point. So if you need to change anything for separate users, either do it in a GPO or something else, but it's not being saved in the application layer. And all the rights and all the actions that you do will be saved in the disk. So even if you, what I just said, download anything, delete it, all those actions will be saved. ELM. A lot of questions have been asked around this for making the ELM high available. It's not needed. The only one who is talking to the ELM are you, the admins. So the end users are never in direct contact with the ELM. So even if it goes down, the application layers, the OS layers, everything that you have created, your end users will be able to connect to them. Even if the ELM is down or for some reason broke, no worries. The existing application layers, OS layers, will be functioning. What you can do is back up your ELM using the regular hypervisor tools that you have, hypervisor backup management that you have. And as well, the Elastic layers will be using the service connecting to the share and not to the ELM. If you're using Elastic layers, make sure that the file share is optimized for read-only or for reads and not as much as writes, because that share will be only used for reading. And the user layers, because there are a lot of going writes back and forth, make sure that that file share is optimized for writes as well. Any questions so far? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about thin provisioning?
What do you? Sorry. About temp provisioning?
Yeah.
What do you want to know about temp?
It doesn't work. Is it agree?
Sorry?
It doesn't work.
No.
So it's true, yeah? Yeah, that's not work. I think so.
Question?
Yeah.
So I haven't tried 411 yet, but in previous ones it only creates VHD files, PVS, not VHDX. So we have to convert them afterwards.
Yeah. Still.
Is that
Still the same.
No, okay.
Still the same in 411 as far as I know. Some troubleshooting tips as well. If you run into some issues with your user layer, just go to the program data, Unidesk logs, and then the U layer SVC log. You can find there the information. The logs itself are really helpful and are really verbose, so you can find a lot of information in there if something goes wrong. If you're using file shares, just check in the registry if that path is still correct. If there are any issues with connecting or user layers not being available, just make sure that the file shares path is correct there as well. Maybe you updated it or permissions were skewed. Make sure that path is the same in the registry for the users. The service as well. It's always good to check the services if they are running. It's always a good start. Inside the guest OS, if you're using AppLayering, or at least the Elastic layering, make sure that the layer service is running. If you don't have that service running, your Elastic layers won't work. For the PVS connector, that's something that usually is getting overlooked very quickly. The services. If you're using PVS, your SOAP and streaming services need to run under a AD account. If you're using a network service account or a local account, your ELM will not be able to connect to your PVS server. Also, make sure on the PVS server side that bits, PS remoting, and WinRM are running and also configured. And also that the firewall ports, should you have any ports between your ELM and your PVS servers, that these ports are opened. Otherwise, the ELM will not be able to communicate with PVS and can't do any options or actions at that point on the PVS server. Last but not least, we also have a layer priority utility. If you're running into problems where an application is not launching correctly or has either a wrong DLL that it's using, could be that the layers are not in the correct order. The layer priority utility is a simple tool which you can use and to identify in which priority the layers are being set up when the OS image is created. So at that point, if you run into any problems, you can select it and also move the layers at that point and see if there are any problems and if the problems are solved as well.
Is this something that we can expect from director?
Not sure at the moment. From what I've heard internally, I haven't heard anything that this option is going to be in director, but could be a good option for the. Yeah, absolutely. New layers, new features in 4.11. Full support for Windows 10. Store apps. Up until now, you had to disable the store apps. So if you're running 17.03, 17.09, you can now enable the store apps without any problem. Enhanced Azure support. So we added support, at least for the desktops and session hosts. If you're running anything in Japanese language OS, you can do that as well. Office 365 user layer for session hosts is now also available. In the previous release, we had already support for Windows 10. Now it's also for Server OS supported.
Which version? Also 2016 or?
Sorry, Henry?
2016 or?
2016, yeah. So I believe 2012 R2 and 2016 are supported. And last one, improved connector configuration management. We simplified the management for the connectors as well. There are some new lab features as well in 4.11. There are experimental, so don't use them into production, as a disclaimer. And of course, all the features that are in labs it's not always necessary that they will turn up in any future release, but it's for us as well a little experiment to see if customers are using these features and if it works as well. In the 4.11 we have the full user layer, so that so you can have that. And as well, I think this is a very nice feature. You can switch application layers as an elastic layer to a different OS layer than it's created on. So previously you had to have an application layer created on the OS that you want to run it on. So if you create an application layer based on 17.03 and you upgrade to 17.09, you need to redo your application layer as well. And now with the elastic layering, at least you can switch it. Even though it's based on 1703, you can try and match it on the 1709 build and see if that's working. Then some documentation. Configured some good links on how to start and some more explanation. I think I forgot the best link for Carl Salholt. He documented the entire thing, but and also some best practices, all the best practices for app layering in the CTX article, and the how do I are also a very nice reference for how to start and how to configure everything. Any questions at that point? At this point? Nope. Everyone good?
What are your feelings for Citrix internally because of the AppLayering product? Will it evolve more because they laid off the team last year? So
sorry, Dave?
They laid off some parts of the Unidest from the Unidest team last year.
I do think that they will continue with AppLayering. They discarded, maybe not the correct word, but discarded app disks in favor of AppLayering. So I do think that this is a product that will be continued. Any other questions? Any experience you want to share with AppLayering or issues that you run into? Yeah?
Well, it's just a rumor that you mentioned two things that you should think of, because otherwise the performance will be very terrible. Maybe. So that's first to do something on the laser store.
The network connection between the ELM and the file share.
Maybe, but what I heard is that if you update some layers,
Yeah.
that can take forever. For whatever reason, I don't know.
Yeah, that has that's in regard to the cache. If you're running VMware, especially, that will take a very long time if you don't use the cache on your hypervisor, and you create an application layer or update an application layer. Your OS layer will be copied to your hypervisor. On VMware, it needs to be converted to a VMDK, and that conversion takes a while. So if you utilize the cache for all the OS layer, that will be copied and it won't be discarded after you finalize the application layer. Because you...
What is that cache? You have a template VM, that's a distance template VM.
Yeah?
So what cache is that attached to that VM, or what is it?
No, the cache is for your OS template that you have created. So you have a diskless template VM that's being used for provisioning, and you have the OS template, and that is being used to create your application layers.
That's for one cache.
And the cache uses or caches the OS layer at that point, because every time you create an app layer, it copies as well the OS layer to your hypervisor and then boots up the machine, so you can start creating your app layer. And if you finalize the app layer, at that point, if you don't use the cache, it will delete the VM and also deletes the OS template again. So if you have to create 10 or 15 applications or app layers, and at that point you create 15 instances or temporary VM at that point, and you have to copy that OS template 15 times to your hypervisor. So especially if you're using VMware, then at that point you have to convert 15 times your OS template. So that takes quite some while, and if you have maybe small applications, that time will...
So, but can you even do that, 15 applications? Can several people do 15 applications at the same time? That means you have 15 OS VMs.
Then at that point you have 15 OS VMs, yeah. If your hypervisor storage is available and resources are available, you can do that. Because every time it caches the OS, and it creates a temporary disk where you install your application on, and that disk is only copied back to the ELM at that point.
It also depends on the VM that's actually the layering VM. There's also limited capabilities, I think, if you do application applications. One layering VM is probably not enough. Or
Sorry?
we have this the console VM, what is the maintenance VM for layering.
Yeah.
It has to direct everything to storage, etc. So if you're doing existing applications at one time, it's probably not enough to use one maintenance VM for that.
It creates 15 VMs at that point, so your hypervisor will have 15 VMs running.
They're all directed from the unit layering VM, right? Maintenance.
You can kick off. You can kick off 100
Yeah.
new.
That's not a problem.
VMs, and
Your
it
your hypervisor is doing all the work.
It's more a matter of vCenter performance.
Yeah, your hypervisor will do all the work, and if 15 VMs are done and they're all finalized at the same time, at that point it will just queue that information and convert that at that point the applications into a layer. So, and then the conversion that will take some time. If you have 15 large application layers that need to be finalized, yeah, that will take some time at that point.
And what's still the best practice, one application per layer, or is that depending on the customer?
I would say keep it at one application per layer. You can do multiple applications in one layer, but again, if you need to update it, then you need to update that entire layer. So if you have an application that is updated frequently, then you need to create either a new application layer or new update layers.
There will be a shadow copy of the one in production, so you can
Yeah.
replace that at a certain point.
Yeah. Yes.
So we're using PBS, and what you used to be able to do in PBS was you install your app and you put it in private mode, give it to the customer, they test it, and then if they find a slight mistake, like one registry key entry missing, you put it in private mode, make the change, put it back in standard mode.
Yep.
Now you have to go back to the ELM, recreate your packaging VM, go in, make your change, finalize it, and then publish it. So it now takes about 2 to 3 hours to make one tiny change that you could do in 5 minutes with private mode.
True.
So I have an enhancement request. When you finalize a layer, can you have an option to not delete the packaging VM? Because if you do have to go back, you can save yourself half the time by already having it there. Because otherwise, once you finalise it, it deletes it from the hypervisor.
Yeah.
And if you want to go back and make a change, you've got to recreate the packaging VM. Whereas if you hadn't deleted it when you finalised,
True.
You
That.
can
It's not possible.
No.
No, because when you finalize it, it makes the update complete. Then basically, also the caching is just it's a file copy action. And you make everything on the app layering device. You make the OS layer, and the first time you make an OS layer, you just make a machine. You install the tools, and then you capture that machine. That's the first base of the OS layer. Everything you do from then on, it just the first time if you don't have caching yet, it does a file copy from the app layering machine, which is just a standalone machine. Copies the file to the hypervisor that you use. If it is SAN service, it's just a straight copy. If it is VMware, it needs to make a translation for the file to make it compatible with VMware. So it's just a file copy. You can also see it on your hypervisors when you have the caching. You see the file actually in your storage repository there. If you make an application layer, basically what it does, it just creates. You say how big the application layer size has to be. It just creates a new machine. It bounds the cache disk if you already have it there, so then we don't have a file copy for the OS there if the caching is on. And it just makes a second disk to the machine just for the application part there. And that's a lot smaller disk. So if you finalize that one, it doesn't take hours. It really takes minutes depending on the size of the application disk and the installables that you've made. Once you finalize it, the machines get shut down. You have to also finalize the app layering machine. And that means that the app layering part says, okay, now I'm going to capture the change of it, now I'm going to capture that disk. So the second disk that has been created is being copied over to the app layering machine there. There's only for an application, let's say 2 GB for example. That's the only thing that's copied over. So it's not the whole disk again. And if you want to make an update, what you said for this application, you just say in app layering, well, I want to make a new version there. And it just packs the cached OS. If you have it cached, if there's still space there, the cached app layering, makes a new version, so you open it. It's more than 5 minutes. I agree there, but it's not 2-3 hours. So it's really it
Shouldn't take 2-3
say 50
hours.
minutes or something to make it ready. Also depends, of course, on the storage that's on the. It's beneath there. If you have fast SSD storage and you have a good network within your data center, you can imagine it will be a lot quicker. But it's really good. But in the end, all the layers, the OS layer, the platform layer, the application layer, they're all stored locally on the standalone device. And then when you finalize the image and it gets provisioned to PVS, that's a fast copy. You make a new disk and copy it to the PVS machine and import the disk there. Yeah.
Do you have the cache configured? Or?
Yeah. I'm wondering, having seen that slide, whether we've got it big enough.
Okay. So that's probably good to check at least in your connector,
Yep.
see if that's large enough and either increase the size. Okay, I think it's time. Lunchtime.
Great.
Thank you very much.